Welcome back, friends, to episode 23 of the Grunge Bible podcast. Chris Salona here, joined with Ethan Shalloway as usual. Ethan, episode 23, it is currently a Tuesday afternoon for us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful Tuesday, even though Tuesday is, I think, one of the worst days of the week as far as like...
I would agree.
It's not... I mean, Monday sucks, but like we talked about before, there's opportunities on Monday. But Tuesday's like you got everything in front of you, and all you guys one day behind you. So, but I have a bachelor party this weekend that I've planned for a friend that I'm actually the best man in his wedding. So I'm catching up with some good old friends come Thursday night into the weekend in a cabin. So and then I'm going right to the beach for a week. So. This is like one of the last things one of the last boxes I'm checking off for the week, and before I sign off Thursday morning. I'm not working obviously Friday, so I'm excited about that.
Absolutely, that's perfect.
How about you? How's your week going? And what do you got? What do you got lined up?
We're hanging in there. Back to the grind. Just working. I feel similarly to you about Tuesdays, but for me personally, Thursday is my least favorite day of the week. Just because, you get to Thursday and you're just like, all right, man, like just get to the point. Like we're almost there on Friday, but I don't know. I mean, each day has its own opportunity, but I'm doing well. Just kind of working, running, getting back into lifting a little bit, and today we're gonna actually talk about Facelift, the debut album from Alice in Chains, which is very important. So we're going to be commemorating the 31st birthday of Facelift. So this podcast is going to come out on Friday, August 20th. And on August 21st, way back in 1990, Facelift was released. So I'm excited to talk about that. That's kind of one of the albums that kicked off the big bang of grunge rock, as they say. Yeah. So we're excited, but before we get to that, this was a big weekend for us, Ethan, as podcasters and as...
we leveled up twice almost.
Yeah, we passed go and we collected $200, to put it lightly. Well, not $200. Almost. But the big news is that we have 3 new members of the Grunge Bible Patreon party over the weekend. Since last Friday's episode came out, we had 3 individuals decide they wanted to support the cause. So today and always, we are very thankful for someone who goes by the username of C3907 joined the cause. So... oh, great warrior! Like
007, James Bond.
We'll have to watch out. So they decided that they wanted to support us, and additionally, we have two new members of the top tier, which is now at 9. So the 2 individuals that decided to join us this weekend, one of them goes by the name Marianne, and then the other individual signed up under the name The Real Billy Corgan. So I cannot confirm if this is Billy Corgan or not.
I was going to say, what are the odds that Billy Corgan is giving us $10 a month?
I think they're very low. I think Billy Corgan would hate us.
We haven't done a Smashing Pumpkins episode yet either.
I know. Well, maybe that's why he's upset. People always say that he's super egotistical, so maybe we haven't given him some of the spotlight. Now we're slandering him, so he'd probably just tell us to fuck off.
Billy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. But thank you for the real Billy Corgan.
Yes, to the real Billy Corgan, to Marianne, and to C3907. Thank you. So Marianne...
I mean, that's 25. That's like a 25% increase to like what we were. I mean,
which is really great. And Marianne awesome. And Mr. Corgan, they join Release, Sue, Jade Mercado, Alexa Shannon, Shannon Gorgon, Victor Schaefer, and Sonny Mashburn as a part of that top 9. And it just really... I was surprised when we got 3 new people, and I'm very thankful for that. And a decent amount of work goes into putting this podcast together, and if you're enjoying it so far, and if you're getting some satisfaction out of it, that's such a great way to support us. I mean, we're making this still to this point, with money out of our own pockets, to put this podcast together. So if you're enjoying it, it'd be great if you just checked out that page and just kind of saw what that was all about as Mr. Corgan, Marianne, and 007 decided to do this weekend. But that fired me up a little bit. I was pretty excited about that.
Oh, yeah, that notification we talked about in the beginning, when that pops up, and then one of us shoot a text over, and we get to celebrate for a moment, that picks up any day. I mean, that picked up yesterday. That picked up the Monday or Sunday when you sent it. So it's it's really gratifying, and we're very thankful for you guys. So, thank you.
The show goes on.
The show goes on. Yeah,
absolutely. And with that, I think it's time to talk some Facelift.
Yeah, let's start this episode 23 Facelift anniversary party, as we like to call it. What do you want to start? You got a little background on it?
Well, there's one thing I have to start with when it comes to the Facelift album, and that's the album artwork. Because to put it mildly, when I first saw the album artwork when I was a lad, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on there. I didn't know if that was like man, woman, child, skeleton, ghost, whatever. So I did some research on the album artwork, and the chief photographer was a gentleman by the name of Rocky Schenk, and I believe Mr. Rocky was also the individual who photographed the Jar of Flies cover, and presumably, I guess he might have done the Dirt album as well if he was involved with those two projects. And I didn't know this before, prior to a few hours ago, but the individual pictured on the cover, it's actually Mike Starr, the bassist at the time.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, so apparently what they did, what Rocky and the band did, is like they were at a pool and they used different like plastic sheets, like plexiglass, and they different exposures and color techniques, and they took pictures of everybody, of all four individuals in the band at the time. And the original plan was to have all four of them on the cover in the style of the actual cover right now, but I guess they ended up just deciding on just using Mike Starr's picture. But there is a picture of the four all together, like all like quadded up, like on like a quasi album cover, and I think they released that picture as a part of the Music Bank box set in the late 90s. But yeah, that album cover always freaked me out a little bit, man. I didn't.
I actually was listening to the album earlier today, and I clicked on, and I don't know if you can see it, but they have like on the Spotify, they have the reels.
Oh,
and it just goes back.
That was
and
from
it's
the
like
shoot.
And it's his face, just popping out of the water under, and it came out with a really, I was looking at it and I thought maybe that, they took like a picture and like, it looks almost like it was double imposed, like next to each other to kind of like, because it didn't look like a real, and I don't know how much editing went into it, or if it's just like, just a little bit of color, but it's really cool, and it fits the rest. It fits the style of, they have these like, deep orange red album covers, and
just a lot of different energy all at once. And it's interesting, speaking of the style of this record, so they went into the studio in December 1989 to start the recording sessions for this, and recording had pretty much wrapped up by April of 1990, so a few months before it was released in August of 1990. And one thing I always love to think about with these debut albums from these bands is, the days and the weeks that they went into the studio, what type of music was popular? It's like, what was at the top of the charts then? And the fact they were going in there, like Alice in Chains, at the time you had Lane Staley, Jerry Cantrell, Sean Kinney, and Mike Starr, as a part of the band. And, they were going in the studio and they created for this album something unlike anything that you had heard. And just to be able to innovate, because it was so antithetical to a lot of the stuff. 1989, it was still kind of like the hair band reign, and Guns N' Roses was everywhere, and I know I'm not going to beat a dead horse there. We don't think highly of them, but, I guess a little bit of Metallica too, and I know Alice in Chains has always kind of been spoken about, hand in hand, a little bit with Metallica, but, just going in there and, just kind of the sound they created was really, really impressive, because it was, they had a clean slate, in their minds when they went in that studio.
Yeah, and another thing that I like to, the other reason I like debut albums is, this is before they're famous. Like, their debut albums, like, it's before anybody knows about them, and like, they're literally forming a band, and Jerry, when they first met, they were at a party, and he heard Lane. He's like, I heard him sing. He's like, all I know is I want to be in a band with him. And then this is the first set of songs that they kind of came out with. And it was also, I think it was I think we spoke about earlier, the first album pretty much in the big four to go gold, which is 100,000 copies sold, you said?
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. It took just about a month. I think by September of 1990, it had already sold 100,000 copies. So
yeah. So they were, I mean, this is really the first introduction to the Seattle sound in the big four. There's some other stuff, but I love the fact that it's, like I said, before Fame, before anything really got on the radio for them. So I think it's just super raw, and like this is a really good representation of like with no expectations, what do you produce, and like no real no kind of band history yet, and so it's unadulterated.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially, those two elements, nobody had an expectation for what an Alice in Chains album should sound like at the time. The band was really, really just free to navigate that space that they wanted. And that's another good point. This was a year before 10 came out. 10 came out in 1991 in August, and then Nevermind and Bad Motorfinger came out 13 months later in September of 1991. So, aside from all of the other bands that had existed, I mean, Soundgarden and Nirvana had released, obviously they had released some records, but not to the acclaim that they would. And, Alice in Chains really kind of started things off, which is funny because thinking back, I don't think about that. I don't think about the time and space that they occupied. And I mean, even you just look at this record. So the first piece of material to come out of this, I think in the summer of 1990, predating the album, "We Die Young" was the first single that they released. So that was really, I love to always think back to what a band's like introduction, or like hello to the world was. And with Alice in Chains, it was "We Die Young." And then, moving on, their second single, I think the song that everybody remembers from Alice in Chains, and especially from this album, is "Man in the Box." I mean, just to be able to go in there and make something like that.
And that's the one that took this album, obviously, to the next level, because I believe that it was the first song that got onto MTV and the radio for them. And because I think that there was a little bit of hesitancy to start with putting it on, but once they got in, like that's what really blew it up and took their sales, incredibly high and got them out there. So yeah, "Man in the Box" is, this for a reason. It is really a great song. So I mean, I love the beginning, just like the.
Oh, absolutely, and they've got like that voice box thing going on, and it's really interesting. I think a common misconception that a lot of, music fans in general, I think a lot of Alice in Chains fans know this, but Lane Staley did not write many of the lyrics, for Alice in Chains, but this was one of the few ones that he did. And there's a great interview, where they're asking, they're like, "Lane, like, what's Man in the Box about?" He's like, "Well, it's about, I think it's about media censorship or something like that." But he's like, "I don't know." He was like, "I was stoned when I wrote it, so I, probably meant something different then." I mean,
which is
in Lane form,
which is one of the things that we love about Lane. Just like when you listen to it, it's like whatever you want it to be when you listen to it, that's what it is. That's what it's about. And yeah, this album, I feel like, this was pre. I mean, I think there was some. I guess how do you say it lightly? This was like pre all. I mean, they were into drugs a little bit, but they weren't living in like addiction.
Right. This was Lane was part. I mean, they were all partying hard, but I believe in the timeline of Lane's struggle with addiction, this was a little bit before he had really begun to struggle. So it's it's interesting, and "We Die Young" was written about just like a lot of drug death and violence and everything like that, and. And this was also I think right around the time or right before even Andy Wood passed away, and that was one of the first big casualties of Seattle to drugs. So it's really like the last piece of a different era, and it's so interesting because Alice in Chains wrote this before anybody knew what they who they were, and Seattle by that time had almost a decade's worth of really, really hardcore underground music experience, with that blend of, punk and rock and everything that would become grunge. So it's just a great harnessing of that sound. I mean, just to pick out a couple of the songs on here, I mean, the diversity on this record, you have "Man in the Box," you have "We Die Young," you have "Love, Hate, Love," which is one of the greatest ballads, I think, to come out of, if you want to call it a ballad, but slower, just gut-wrenching songs. And you have "It Ain't Like That," "Sunshine," Real Thing, I Can't Remember.
Bleed the Freak.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's some really, was it 12 songs? Yeah, there's
12 songs.
Some really good songs on here. And I think that even for the fans of the band, this album for some reason does go a little under the radar for how good it is and how well put together it is. Do you know why? Like, why do you think that this one does go under the radar? As far as, is it because like people like Dirt and Jar of Flies have such a, I don't know, a little bit more, like I said, they were anticipating, Dirt or something like that, anticipation, or why is that?
It's a really good question, and I would say, with an EP like Jar of Flies, I mean, the critical acclaim that received, and I think a lot of people kind of treat that as Alice in Chains' magnum opus, in the sense that this was their creation. This was but it is interesting, and it's funny because in 1990, I think Alice in Chains they were marketed as a metal band at the time. I mean, there was no grunge circuit for them to tour on. There was no Nirvana that was going to fill stadiums or whatever, so it is interesting, and with the 31 years between us and the album release, and especially as a fan who didn't grow up there, it's kind of it's interesting, even for me with this record. I mean, Man in the Box, as soon as you learn Alice in Chains, it was probably the first song that many of us in our generation heard. It's either that or Rooster, probably. Rooster, yeah. Exactly. And for me, same thing. I didn't really listen to this album a whole lot until I had just got my first car. I think I had just gotten out of high school, and it was an old car, so it didn't have an aux cord, so I was buying up CDs. I ended up purchasing this one, and when you have a CD, you just kind of let it play front to back, and that's really when I discovered just how powerful this album was, and it was so much more than Man in the Box. And that discovery process, and it's interesting, I wonder what it was like, to maybe be a teenager or 20-something in 1990 when it came out.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to touch on too. It's so different looking. I mean, this album is 4 years older than me,
right?
And 6 years older than you, 7. And I always, when I think about this stuff, I always try to compare it to bands and how the music scene shifted in, say, 2013 when I was getting out of high school, or a couple years after during college, like what the music scene, how it was like kind of moving and forming, and like. I'm sure, it was probably huge. It's kind of, like I said, hard to understand how big this album was for Seattle when it came out. And the only way to I feel like the only way to really understand it is to connect it with something that, we lived through. And I'm trying to think of a good example. But either way, so maybe it's a little bit like revisionist history for us, or something like that. Like we're looking back, knowing the numbers and stuff, and maybe we just, and that's that's our fault. That's something that we sadly we missed. I mean, we can't go back and experience.
We can't fix that. We'll forever have missed out on that, and you can. Maybe that takes away our credentials, to even do a post-mortem on this album. But who knows? I mean, you're put in the situation that you're put into. But Ethan, if you had to pick two songs on this album that you would consider to kind of be your favorite, or if you're gonna listen to Facelift, which two would you turn to? If you just had to pick a couple.
I think that I really do like We Die Young as an opener, and I really like Bleed the Freak as well. But I think Sea of Sorrow is a really good one, because it gets kind of, it has a lower point in the middle where it kind of gets down, and then I think it's just well put together, and it's a solid song that, should be listened to more. So I don't know. Those are the three that I would kind of go with.
Absolutely.
How about you?
Another interesting point before I get to my picks, there's not really a whole lot of Jerry Cantrell singing on this record. And I believe, and the specifics of this anecdote are escaping me right now, but if I remember correctly, at some point, before Dirt was recorded and after Facelift was recorded, I think it might have been even Lane who had encouraged Jerry, to sing a little bit more. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of Jerry, certainly not like taking a verse or taking a chorus like he would certainly later on, but just kind of an interesting thing, because I'm thinking of some of my favorites right here, and I think, for some reason I've always been drawn to the song Sunshine on this album, and I think for me it's just tied to memories of having that CD in my first car, and just blasting down the road listening to Sunshine, and then lately It Ain't Like That has been growing on me. I just posted it a few days ago, but those are, coincidentally, they're 7th and 8th back to back on the album, and just I think a song like Sunshine, I mean, it's just got that. Lane's vocals are top notch as they are up and down this album, and just I don't know, it's just classic Jerry Cantrell music, and he contributed the overwhelming majority of the music on It Ain't Like That. Actually, he shared music credits with Sean Kinney and Mike Starr, but aside from that, it was pretty much all Jerry, as it continued to be. But I don't know, it's just weird, how people are able to come together and they can be so different, but they fit so well. I mean, even just think about the voices of Lane and Jerry, and how later on in their careers, as they began to experiment more with doing harmonies and just trading verses and choruses, I mean, it's crazy because you take an album like Facelift, it was that good, and they still had room to grow, and they grew,
Yeah, they grew into, basically different spaces. I mean, we talked about this in one of our other pods, and I think each album is in its own room in the house. I mean, it has its own space. Each, you can go to different, I feel like this has, significant differences than, Dirt. And then, of course, the EPs are
even like the Sap EP, which came, I think, shortly after this, just drastically different worlds. I like that analogy. It's like, you have this one in one room, maybe down in the living room, and then, up in a small bedroom on the 3rd floor, you have Sap, Exactly, but it's just, I've always been, I feel like I say this every single time we talk about these artists, but I've always just been in awe of the versatility of these musicians, and the cohesiveness and their ability to move to those different spaces together, and sound like, if you take Alice in Chains, you take a song like Love Hate Love, and it sounds like that's the kind of song that they write the best. But then, I mean, you go one song down to It Ain't Like That, and that's a little bit of a harder song, and it sounds like that's the space that they inhabit best. It's just how they were able to make all of these sounds and convey all of these feelings through their music. Just the range that they had has always been really, really impressive to me. And I think you could say that about a lot of the bands that we talk about here. I mean, that's what makes them great, is their ability to kind of navigate those spaces, and go wherever they're inspired to go.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to say, another thing, I'm always impressed by bands, how they can have like a really good album, and then they get back in the studio and write, more. He said more albums, and I always said, I just sent you a new song by Courtney Barnett that came out, and it was like one of those. I mean, I really like her as an artist, and some of her stuff that she did with Kurt Weill, but I didn't know where she would go. Like, I haven't listened to her as much, and I was wondering if I had outgrown her or something. I mean, I was just like, I didn't
or if
know
it just doesn't do it for you anymore.
Yeah, I didn't know what she was going to have to offer, and then a new song comes out, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, I'm like impressed. I'm like, this whole time they've been working on music or something like that, and like I was reminded how artists continue to grow and evolve, and you never know which, when you're writing, you just never know which one's gonna sync up, or which one's gonna sound people are gonna really cling to, and but I love it. I mean, I love that artists can just they keep writing and keep growing. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's really interesting, with an album like Facelift, because that was really. That was the band at the beginning of that growth process, and even in a span of, I think Jar of Flies came out in 1994, in a span of 4 years, they were able to grow that much, and explore that many different areas across, 2 albums and a couple of EPs, and they were able to explore all of those areas. It's always really, really impressive, very impressive to me. Couple of anecdotes. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and of course it comes with, the physical scene that they're living in Seattle, and what's the music scene that's going on. There's a lot of influence. And then obviously like the personal changes in personal life, that always goes so much in the music. And you can tell with albums of this era when people are, I think I saw something that was like, Facelift was, they were kind of like in dark places here and there, but they weren't living there. And then in like Dirt or some other ones, like, they're living there, and it's a different feel at times. So obviously that stuff all goes into it.
Yeah, and it's interesting as fans. I know we have an old friend who cautioned us one time long ago about Alice in Chains, not to spend too much time with them. And I think their music, is really dark. And in my opinion, it might be the darkest out of any of the prominent bands to come from Seattle. And, you start to see a little bit of that here, but certainly as their careers went on, I mean, that's what Lane had a quote, and he was like, we just kind of write about feelings and stuff and things that we know, he's like, we're not writing about, babes or politics or anything like that, he said, and obviously as their lives developed and, they had their conflicts and their struggles, I think they did bring a lot of that into their music, especially on the Dirt album, which, obviously came a few years later, and when Jar of Flies came out in 1994. But I have one anecdote, a piece of lore about this album, and I want you to be the judge whether you believe this is true or not. So,
nice.
Fact
or fiction?
Yes, exactly. So, Sean Kinney, drummer of Alice in Chains, claims that he played the recording sessions of this album with a broken hand. So, as the story goes, he had broken his hand, and in December of '89, when they went in to record it, he couldn't drum because he had a fucking broken hand. So they brought Greg Gilmore of Mother Love Bone in to play, and evidently the band and Greg and Sean, they just decided it wasn't working with Greg. So Sean allegedly cut his cast off of his broken hand and played drums, and while he was set up in the studio, he'd be at the drum kit, and he'd have this ice bucket next to him, and like in between songs he would just plunge his hand into the ice bucket. Now, I mean, this was 31 years ago. After 31 years, I mean, you can make up shit about whatever you want. I mean, we could make up stuff about 5 years ago and no one would be the wiser for it. Do you believe this? Because you're a drummer. Like, you think you could drum with a broken hand?
It depends. How long was it broken? Do we know like the timetable?
I don't know. It was not. I mean, that information was not divulged in the source material that I had.
that was lost in the translation. And,
yeah.
I mean, gut reaction. Like, of course, I believe it.
That's absolutely.
I believe those stories every time, like 10 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. If you have a broken hand, like, especially if it's your right hand, if it's your dominant hand, but maybe like if it's I gotta listen to it back and see like how hard the parts are. But I'm sure that he made it work and he played it. I love the ice bucket though. That really puts the story over the top.
Yeah, well,
if he's playing with a broken hand, he's definitely going to do something like that.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. The Unplugged show that they did, evidently. Another Alice in Chains lore story is that night Jerry Cantrell had food poisoning, and he had a wastebasket next to him the whole night on stage at Unplugged, in case he threw. But the food poisoning apparently came from a bad hot dog that he had eaten earlier in the day.
Glizzy.
Exactly. So and it's one of those things. I mean, we'll never know if these are true or not.
For Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's better.
Cantrell.
It's better. Fucking Unplugged. It's so much better. But yeah, I mean, I'm inclined. I mean, I'll believe, if he said, he recorded they recorded it in like a mine shaft or something, I would believe that,
Right. Yeah, with no contact with the outside world for 30 days before they started recording, something crazy like that.
Yeah, exactly. One final anecdote that I have to share is that the studio that they were using to record it, I believe their recording, dates got delayed a little bit because prior to their sessions, the studio was raided, and it was the biggest marijuana bust in Washington state history at the time. So apparently they were just heaving copious amounts of cannabis in and out of that studio at the time, which, I mean, nowadays it wouldn't really make much of a difference, but I guess they pushed back the Facelift sessions a couple of weeks because of that. That would have made for a good recording environment. Maybe we would have gotten a little bit more of a mellow record had they not busted it.
Yeah, and instead of Facelift, it would have been called like, I don't know, Face Down or something
Very creative.
Yeah, I was trying to think of yeah, that's awesome.
It's interesting, but it's really great, because Facelift really kicks off the fall of, album anniversaries, because starting in August, you have Facelift, and then you have 10 next week, and then getting into September, I believe you have Bad Motorfinger and Nevermind on the same day, and then like 5 or 6 days later, you have Core by Stone Temple Pilots and Dirt by Alice in Chains. So we have our work cut out for us on the podcast to commemorate all of these fantastic albums. But if you're starting off with an album like Facelift, that's not a bad place to start.
No, this started it all. So this is appropriate. I like it a lot. I'm
Absolutely.
glad we were able to talk about this.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
And I'm glad it's 31 years old. That's
old. Well, no, it's not old, because
really
I'm sure we have people who are older than that listening. You guys are great. You guys are young as hell, and you look fantastic.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah. Yep, that's right. Yeah, so you guys are listening to podcasts. You're hip. Not old at all.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to take my foot out of my mouth now, and we can continue onward to the final segment, unless you have any closing thoughts on Facelift, but I think it's time to get to the song of the week.
I think we nailed it. Yeah, I'd love to pop over to the song of the week. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'll go first. With Facelift. I'll go first with the song of the week, and I kind of touched on it earlier. But Courtney Barnett, they have a new song, "Before You Gotta Go," and it's a single off of the album that comes out. When does it come out? I'm not exactly sure.
I think it comes out sometime this fall, because she's touring the U.S. in the springtime for it.
Yes. And I believe, it's one of 2 songs that have been released. Race Street
was the first one. Yep.
Yep. But Before You Gotta Go, so take a listen to that. We put it on the old playlist, and it was solid. It was a really great. I listened to it, I believe, in the morning. Maybe it was at night, and then also the morning. But we've been sending songs back and forth. I love the nightcaps and the early morning songs. Those are like my 2 favorite times, right when I wake up from bed and right when I go to sleep. So that's a perfect one for either of those times.
Absolutely. I'm a big Courtney Barnett fan. I've listened to this song actually, and it's really great. So her album is coming out in November. On November 12th, and it's called Things Take Time, Take Time. And Courtney Barnett is significant for me for the reason that she has her debut album has one of the greatest and one of my personal favorite album titles of all time, and it was her 2015 debut album called Sometimes I Sit and Think and Sometimes I Just Sit. And it doesn't get any better than that. I think for the introspective types out there, that makes a lot of sense. I tie that right in with Feel the Pain by Dinosaur Jr. It's like, you're feeling the pain of everyone, then it's just sometimes you're just sitting. There's nothing to feel, nothing to think about. You just sit. But yeah, Courtney Barnett is absolutely fantastic. I'm a really, really big fan of hers.
Yeah, it's so funny you said it comes out in November, and for a split second I was like, damn, that's pretty far away.
It's really
then
not.
I realized that we're halfway. No, it's really
Dude,
not.
we teleported through 2021.
Yeah. So I'm not even. Yeah, we have like 2 months until that month starts. It's weird. So anyway, so what are you listening
really
to
strange.
Right now?
So we're going back a few decades, as I normally tend to do. But a couple of days ago, this past weekend, for some reason, my Sunday was pretty mellow. I went for a run and then visited some family. Was doing some shopping, but in the morning. So for some reason, I'm in this habit of just kind of listening to blues on Sunday mornings. You get the Sunday blues going, you have your coffee and you just kind of hang out, have a good time. And I decided, so I never really got into the Doors a whole lot. I have a friend who's really, really big into the Doors, and a few years ago she tried getting me in, and I dipped my toes in the water, but I didn't really get in a whole lot. But Sunday blues, I was listening to the L.A. Woman album, which came out in 1971, which is probably their bluesiest record, I would say. And my song of the week is off of that album. It's called "Car Hiss By My Window," and it's just a really like sloppy, slow blues song, and Jim Morrison and the Doors are, top notch, obviously. I think I don't know. Are they one of those bands, and is Jim Morrison one of those people that you might not even like to listen to them, but you can respect, respect what they brought to the table? Because I feel that way about them.
I think, yeah, I think that he became an icon, and he's very historic, and I really don't think that people listen to the Doors like they say they do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that, say
it's
that
very
they like
popular
the Doors,
to say, "Oh man, I love Jim Morrison."
Yeah, they have the shirt. They have
in a way, Jim Morrison was like that generation's Kurt Cobain. That mysterious, character, individual who had a lot of mystique around them, who obviously died way before their time. They were both 27 when they passed away, and I mean, it's the same thing. I think it's really cool. Like, what's up?
I was gonna say, what year did he pass again?
I think he passed in 73 or something like that.
Wow, so almost 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how long. Yeah, no, never mind. He passed away in 1971, July 3rd. Did a live check.
It just passed.
Yeah, so he's been passed away for 50.
The 50-year anniversary just passed.
Yeah, he'd be 77.
Wow. 50 years.
Which is weird to think about. I mean, Kurt would be 57 or something like that. Or 55-ish.
27 plus 27, 54.
Yeah, 54. And yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't know. I've always been fascinated by that concept of when someone passes, they're frozen at that point in time, which is a really strange thing to think about. And it's almost impossible for me to think about like what a 70-something-year-old Jimi Hendrix would be doing, or what Jim Morrison would be up to, or what if Kurt Cobain were Eddie Vedder's age now, which he would be, whether they would be making music, what their thoughts on the world would be. I would love to be able to think about those kind of things, but I just can't, because I don't know where you begin, because they're just frozen at the point, which their lives ended, which is really sad. But, a lot of these people, we have, troves of music to listen to. And this weekend I decided to backtrack to some of the Doors. So that's my song of the week. Who knows, maybe in a couple of weeks' time I'll get more into the Doors, and I'll go and I'll become one of those people, and it'll become a personality trait of mine.
There you go. That would be no better time than now. I think I need to listen to the Doors. There's always so much stuff I need to listen to.
It's overwhelming.
Luckily, I have some drives coming up, so I'm going to be doing that.
Absolutely. That'll be fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the episode.
I believe it does.
That was great. That was a lot of fun. That was episode 23.
23 weeks in a row, man.
23, the Jordan episode. Really great to talk to you. Thank you, everybody that's supporting us. If you guys want to continue supporting us, the links are in our bio. And all you can do is like our posts and like our videos, or like our Spotify. Just do that. I mean, we'll take it. I'll take whatever. Yeah, you can.
Drop a comment. Tell us what you think. I've really, we're almost like half a year into this thing now, which is really strange. And I've read all of the feedback we've gotten, and it's actually helped a great deal. So if you have questions, comments, thoughts, or concerns, we love to hear them. But yeah, just thank you everybody for your support. It really, really means a lot. I didn't really think that it would be received, as well as it has been. So I'm humbled, each time we get a word of thanks.
And I know that we probably sound like a broken record because we do it like twice an episode, but that's sincere, and that's why we do it, because we are very thankful. And it's like, this is our way to I mean, this is like face to face. We're not, not making a post about it. We're talking about it. So we want you guys to hear it from our mouths. Like, we are very, very thankful. So that's why we bring it up every time. So get used to it. It's going to keep coming. So if you want to hear your name, you know
what to do.
You know what? The next person is going to be our top 10, the initial 10, the founding 10. After this, you can't be in the top 10. So who's going to take that spot?
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe it's someone listening right now. But thanks again for listening, everybody. Happy 31st birthday to Facelift, the debut album from Alice in Chains. And we will catch you all next week. We're going to be commemorating 10, which was Pearl Jam's debut album, which will have come out 30 years to the day of that podcast release. So a lot of exciting things coming. Ethan, really enjoyed our time, as I always do. And I will talk to you soon.
Rock and roll, guys. See you next week.
Be well. We'll see you later.